Hi everyone, I'm Miss Hightower, and today we're going to be doing a mini lesson on how to identify active and passive verbs in sentences. So we're going to start with active verbs. So a few things that you should know are a verb is active if the subject of the sentence is the one doing the action. So as a note, it does not matter when the action occurs. It can be in the past, the present, or the future, but it's all about who is doing the action. Therefore, it's always best to figure out who or what the subject of the sentence is first before you try to figure out if the verb is active or passive. So here is an example. The sentence says, "My cat jumps on the couch." Our first question, what's the subject of the sentence? So if we look at it, we can see that cat is the subject of the sentence. The next question, what's the verb of the sentence? So now that we know what the subject is, we can decide what the verb is. The verb is jumps. So our next question, is the cat the one doing the jumping? Cat is the subject, jump is the verb. Is the cat the one jumping? Yes. So in this sentence, since cat is the subject and the cat is the one doing the jumping, the verb jumps is active in this sentence. For another example, my sister shared her story with the class. What's the subject of the sentence? The subject is sister. So now that we know that sister is the subject, what's the verb? The verb is shared. So now we ask, is sister, the subject of the sentence, the one doing the sharing? Yes. So since sister is the one doing the sharing, and sister is the subject of the sentence, the verb in this sentence is active. All right, another example. The volunteers will walk the dogs this afternoon. What's the subject of the sentence? It's volunteers. So what's the verb of the sentence? It's will walk. So notice that we have our helping verb will with our main verb walk, and together they make the verb of the sentence will walk. So are the volunteers the subject of the sentence? Are they the ones doing the walking? Yes. So since volunteers are the ones walking the dogs, the verb will walk is active in this sentence. All right. So now that we understand active verbs a little bit, let's move on to passive verbs. So for passive verbs, if the subject of the sentence is not the one doing the action, then the verb is passive. And it's the same note as with active verbs, but it doesn't matter when the action occurs, in the past, the present, or the future. It's all about who is doing the action. So for passive verbs, just to reiterate, if the subject is not the one doing the action, then it's passive. So here's an example. The cake was made by the bakery down the street. We need to ask the same question first. What's the subject of the sentence? The subject of the sentence is cake. So now we ask the same question again. What's the verb of the sentence? The verb is was made. So cake is our subject, was made is our verb. Is the cake the one doing the making? No. The cake did not make itself. So since the subject of the sentence is not doing the action, the verb is passive. So here's an interesting point as well. You can always take a passive verb and make it active. So how can we do that in this sentence? The cake was made by the bakery down the street. You need to change the subject of the sentence. So instead of saying the cake was made by the bakery, instead you say the bakery down the street made this cake. So now the bakery is the subject of the sentence. It is the one doing the making, so now the verb is active. Here's another example sentence. The book was read by the teacher. So what's the subject of the sentence? It's book. What's the verb of the sentence? Was read. Now we ask, is the book, the subject of the sentence, the one doing the reading? No. The book is not reading itself, so the verb of this sentence is passive. But how can we change this sentence to make the verb active instead? The book was read by the teacher. How do we make that active? Well, we would change the subject to teacher. So we would say the teacher read the book. In this case, teacher is the subject, Teacher's the one doing the reading, so now read is active. Here is another example. The house was built by my grandfather. What's the subject of the sentence? House. What's the verb of the sentence? Was built. So is the house, the subject of the sentence, the one doing the building? No. Since the house isn't building itself, the verb in this sentence is passive. So how can we change it to become active? Well, we need to change the subject of the sentence to grandfather. So now the sentence reads, my grandfather built this house. Grandfather is now the subject. He is the one doing the building. So now built is an active verb. Here's a side note for active verbs. Active verbs can also be made passive by changing the subject of the sentence to be the one that is not doing the action. So just like we can change passive verbs to be active, we can also change active verbs to be passive. So I've given an example here. It says, my brother makes his bed every day. The way that this sentence is written, the verb is active because brother is the subject of the sentence. Makes is the verb. The brother is the one making the bed, so it's active. But if we wanted to make it passive, we would just need to change the subject of the sentence. So we would say, the bed is made by my brother every day. So in this case, bed is now the subject of the sentence, and it's not making itself, so now the verb is passive. So that is how you would take an active verb and make it passive. Now that we have talked about how to identify active verbs, how to identify passive verbs, and how to change them from one to the other, you are going to complete a practice page, and this practice page is going to ask you to first determine whether the verb in each sentence is active or passive, and then once you've determined that, you're going to rewrite each sentence, making active verbs passive and passive verbs active. Of course, please let me know if you have any questions. I will be happy to help you. And I hope that you have learned a thing or two about active and passive verbs. Thank you.